Good evening. My name is Matt Tremola, and I'm the Vice President for Institute Advancement. Really appreciate you joining us on a rainy, cold December night for this special occasion. So I'm grateful to see so many of RPI alumni return to their alma mater and hear from and celebrate a fellow alumnus. So first I'd like to recognize the RA chapter of the Hudson Mohawk. Our president has joined us today, Rocco. If you raise your hand, yep, so thank you, Rocco. We do appreciate very much, Rocco, all that you're doing to support RPI. And I know you've got an event tomorrow night, too, so. Wednesday, 2 nights, yeah. Great. Great, all right. Thank you, appreciate it. Thank you, Rocco. And please, any of you have questions, would like to know more about what that chapter is doing, please let Rocco know. So now it's a pleasure to introduce our speaker this evening, Nick Donofrio, the class of 1967. He graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree in Electrical Engineering. He's former member of the RPI Board of Trustees, a longtime philanthropic supporter of his alma mater, and a member of the Rensselaer Society of Patroons. Nick led a successful 44-year career at IBM, retiring as Executive Vice President of Innovation and Technology. He's a recognized leader in engineering, science, and technology, having received many honorary degrees. He's a fellow of the Institute for Electrical and Electronics Engineers, the UK-based Royal Academy of Engineering, the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and a member of the US-based National Academy of Engineering. Nick is focused on the advancement of education, employment, and career opportunities for underrepresented minorities and women. He was appointed by the U.S. Department of Education to serve on the Commission on the Future of Higher Education, a 20-member delegation focused on developing a national strategy for post-secondary education to meet the needs of our country's diverse population and to address the economic and workforce needs of the future. In 2022, Nick published his autobiography, If Nothing Changes, Nothing Changes, which recounts how he drove innovation and collaboration through leading IBM's global technology team and the human ability to create transformation. There's a lot more I could say, but let me hold it here. We're excited, Nick, to have you join us, and we look forward very much to your talk this evening. So please join me in welcoming Nick Donofrio.
Matt, that was wonderful, just pretty much as I wrote it, so thank you. It's great to be with you all. It truly is. It's great to be back on campus again. I want you to know, for some of you, I even put my friggin' graduation ring on, which I haven't had on in 30 years, so it's kind of amazing that it actually fit, which is wonderful. There's so much to talk about tonight, and there's so much that I want to learn from you as we discuss what's really going on in the world. So if you're okay, we'll get started. And I know we're videotaping this, so I prefer to walk and talk, and I actually could chew gum at the same time, but I don't have any in my mouth right now. And I want to help you understand the context, if I could, with respect to if nothing changes, nothing changes. So that's not just an accident. That's just not a cute phrase. That happens to be the advice that my father, God rest his soul, gave me many, 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 many years ago. So I'll be 80 next year, just to calibrate you. So this was probably when I was 12. On this porch, this is the house that I was raised in, on this porch with my father when he uttered these words to me for the first time. Now, I see a lot of other faces here, some IBM former colleagues here. They've heard this phrase over and over and over again while I was at IBM. Because I used it to kind of make my points about how fast everything was changing. My father was not a well-educated person. He was a hardworking person. He was first-generation American, so I am the grandson of Italian immigrant grandparents. And my father never finished high school. He quit in the 10th grade. He was one of 4 boys, His mother passed away early in life, and my grandfather, who spoke almost no English ever, literally called home for a mail order bride. And the only grandmother I ever knew was that grandmother that came on the boat by herself to become his wife and to become the mother of my father and his 3 other brothers, so 4 boys. So you get the picture. This is, I won't say it's a hard luck, hard knock story. My grandfather had skills. He was a shoemaker. He came from that part of Italy, right outside of Naples. But when he came here, he became a hat maker, because I'm from Beacon, New York, and that's what they were making in Beacon, New York at the time, was hats. So that's how he made his living. And my father kind of grew up in that rough and tumble world. Out of school, out of high school in the 10th grade, went into the Army, of course, went into World War II, met my mother, who was the exact opposite of my father. My mother was, by every stretch of every imagination or any standard you have, just an incredibly brilliant woman. She graduated from New York City High School at 16 years old. She spoke 3 languages. She probably could have gone to college, but again, where they came from, the kind of background they had, it wasn't even possible to think about those things. That was just not an affordable thought process for them. So on one hand, I have my mother, who is nurturing, giving, teaching, learning, thoughtful, also tough, by the way. She could reel us in. I was one of 4 children. And I have a father who's pretty much the opposite. Works 3 jobs to make a living, right? He's a guard at a New York State penal institution. I was born and raised in Beacon, New York, not so far from here down the Hudson. So my father's a guard for the bulk of the day, and then he's a painter, a house painter, when he gets done with being a guard, and then he's a night watchman before he comes home and goes to bed. So he works 3 jobs. You get the picture? So he's a tough guy. He's a really tough, rough and tumble guy. And along the way, it was obvious to me how rough and tumble this guy was and how different I was than him. He had 3 jobs. I had to have 3 jobs. I delivered newspapers every day after school for 5 years. I won the Gannett News Scholarship, which is how I came to RPI and afforded to graduate from here without a debt. Was because of the Gannett News Scholarship. But my father made us work all the time. My brother, myself, on a regular basis. And, as you start to grow up and you become, a teenager, you start to say, well, what's going on here, right? And why am I so different than everybody else? And why is he being so hard with me? Why can't he cut me some slack? Why can't I do what everybody else seems to be doing, which is enjoying life a little bit more than I thought I was enjoying life? So this one famous summer night on this porch, I braved it with him to kind of put it to him. And you didn't put much to my father because he spent most of his time putting it to you. Some of you are Italian, we used to mete out punishment at the dinner table. Not a best practice, for sure, but it's what he knew. He was only with us a short period of time. He was between going from painting houses to the night watchman job before he came back home. So he had maybe a half hour with us. We're at dinner. And if any of you have ever had dinner or lunch or breakfast with me, you know how fast I eat. Because if I didn't eat all my food in the first 5 minutes, I didn't get to eat. Because my sisters were ratting me out for everything I did. And I was ready to move in case, he decided to take it out on me, which was often the case, by the way. So it's a rough and tumble kind of an environment is what I'm trying to paint the picture for you. So when I decide to have this conversation with him, that fateful summer night, I know what I'm in. I know what I'm headed for, right? It's not like I'm a fool here, but I pretty much have had it with him. And I say to him, look, Dad, enough is enough. Why is it that nothing I do is ever good enough for you? I can't, no matter what I do, you want me to do more. I have no life. I work one job, you work one job, you work two jobs, I have to work two jobs, you work three jobs, I have to work three jobs. When does this all stop, Dad? And when do I get to have a life? And I am ready to move, because you never know how he's going to respond, right? I mean, as we say in Italian, pacca pacca la ghoul. I mean, so, giving you a spanking was the thing to do. I mean, it was what he knew. I'm ready to move. He didn't. He stayed right there on the porch, looked me right in the eye, and that's when he said to me for the first time, because, son, if nothing changes, nothing changes. So why would I want you to keep doing what you're doing, which is close to what I was doing, if that's not what we want for you? That's not what you should want for yourself. You should want something much better. And I can't give it to you, you have to do it. So you have to become the person of change, son. So it's up to you. So if you don't like what you've been getting, then don't keep doing what you've been doing, because that's all you're going to get. Now, that's not even his original phrase. I'm sure he's paraphrasing it from somebody else, but you get the point. This is the passion. This is the energy. This is the feeling that evening in the summer on this front porch. And it stays with me my entire life. It makes me who I am. It is the underpinning of the autobiography. This autobiography also has 38 other people in it. So if you haven't read it, I encourage you to think about reading it, because there's 38 other very smart people who have even better advice to give you than mine. I've simply framed it for them in discussion as we go through this book. It's rather large. It's over 400 pages. It was 2 books at one time, to be honest with you, but I got disgusted with myself. I could barely write 1. I wasn't going to write 2, so I just arbitrarily slammed them together and then found a way to net it down to get it into the hands of a publisher who was willing to publish something around 420 pages. Took me 6 years to write it. I didn't know that I wanted to write it. I talked myself into it and out of it every other month. It's a lot of work to do this. But as I got closer to the end, I started to figure out this was the right thing to do. This really was a worthwhile endeavor on my part. And hopefully you're going to find it to be a worthwhile endeavor on your part. So with that being said, I like to remind people who we are. There's a science to everything, there's an engineering to everything, and there's an art to everything. And bringing those 3 things together is how real value is created. That's how real innovation occurs in the world, at least the world that I live in. Everybody could have their own perspective here, but since the mic is mine tonight, you're going to have to listen to it the way I see it and the way I understand it. You see this chart? I actually fell in love with this chart because it finally expressed for me what that phrase was all about. If nothing changes, nothing changes. It's a simple chart. It's not mine. I give credit to the New York Times. I think it showed up in the New York Times 35 years ago, or maybe 40 years ago now. I keep forgetting how old I am. So, it's probably 40 or so years ago. It's not my chart. The chart is pretty simple. When you look at it, it simply says things get bigger and things get smaller, all because of technology. That's what drives us from, I started my life, I like to tell people, I started here at 1. You see the 1 here. This is all scientific notation. It should be a layup for all of you. So there's 1, and my 40 years, actually, to be candid with you, it's 60 years now that I've been in the industry. I joined IBM in 1964, so it's 60 years this year. Takes me all the way up here to 10 to the minus 18th for small and 10 to the 18th plus for big. The same technology that makes things small makes things big. The same thing that makes things big makes things small. So it doesn't say what the technology is. It just says things are going to scale. They are changing that fast. 18 orders of magnitude in 60 years. That's a lot. 18 orders of magnitude. For many of you, it's your life too. For you younger people, it's actually going to be even more exciting for you. It'll be more than 18 orders of magnitude improvement. Hard to believe, hard to fathom. You can't predict where it's going to come from, but it's going to happen. And it's going to come at you in every direction you can think of. So it's not like one science or one engineering, benefits and the others don't. We'll talk a little bit about some life science stuff. I mean, the reason life science has been and become and will be the science of the 21st century is because of physical science. It's because of all the things we've done in physical science that enables all of that wonderful transformation work to be done in life sciences. You haven't even seen anything yet. You haven't. I mean, sequencing the genome was one thing, finding what RNA good is or isn't, and more importantly, what your protein structure must be and what you need to focus on. All of that is yet to be determined. All of that is yet to be unraveled. And when it unravels, it's going to create a lot of opportunity and a lot of wealth for a lot of people. Small things get smaller, big things get bigger. Pick your favorite order of magnitude. Pick it. I mean, I hope to be around to see yottabytes and yoctoseconds. 10 to the 24th and 10 to the minus 24th. Of course, Jerry Seinfeld, if you watch that show, is already kind of yada byte things. I mean, there was one episode where yada was the phraseology that they used. I don't think he knew what he was talking about, but somebody picked it up and slammed it into his script. But it's going to happen. It's going to happen, and you can watch the progress year by year, day by day, week by week. I mean, people are building computers right now that aren't just dealing in the exascale range, they're in the zetascale range. I'm pretty sure before I die, we'll be in the yotta-scale range. Think about that. When, 60 years ago, the base was 1. And now we've got computers that calculate 10 to the 18th, arguably 10 to the 24th. And all the wonderful things that have happened as a result of that. Whether, like I said, it could be life science, it could be political science. I mean, we managed the nuclear stockpile with computers. We don't blow bombs up anymore. We actually know what's in our arsenal better than anyone, and we actually know what's in the Russian arsenal, the Chinese arsenal. No matter what you read, trust me, we know those bombs better than they do. And they know we know. And that's why they don't blow them up, and that's why we don't blow them up. And more of that kind of stuff is going to find its way. This is a famous Kurzweil chart. We don't need to talk about Ray Kurzweil. Maybe you know him. Maybe you like him. Maybe you're a singularity person. I'm not a singularity person, so Ray and I have parted ways. But he built this chart to kind of express what's going on from a computational perspective. The inverse of this chart, of course, just drives costs down. This drives capability up. For the same amount of time and the same amount of money, you get almost 18 orders of magnitude if you follow the chart, my lifetime for 60 years, almost 18 orders of magnitude improvement. And then you sit there and scratch your head and say, well, isn't that that's why. That's why we live in a microelectronics-driven friggin' world. Why is that not important to you? It's what it's all about. This is what underpins most economies, is that capability. If you give people more for the same dollar, that's productivity, they're going to use it. They're going to find a way to take advantage of it. And they are going to become more efficient and more effective as a result of it. That's what is going on. That's what has gone on. Heck, when I was here at RPI, Pepe Borrego, God bless his soul, I know he's long gone, but he was just an amazing professor here. He gave me the break of my life. He allowed me to actually build labs for him around semiconductors. I mean, we could barely spell the word here at RPI. And we had some smart people doing some smart work, but I wanted to get that stuff into the hands of the students. So Pepe let me build all kinds of experiments that we could then build into his labs here. I learned so much while I was here at RPI. And of course, I benefited greatly from RPI's co-op program, which hooked me up. It was competitive then. I don't know what it is now, Marty, but I don't know. In my freshman class, I don't think 100 of us got co-op jobs. And there was like 500 who competed for those jobs. I was fortunate. That's how I joined IBM, was through RPI's co-op program, 1964. And I never left, and that's been my life. So, these curves mean something to me. The thing that I get worried about, especially I'm sure most of you know, a trustee of the National Semiconductor Technology Center as part of the CHIPS and Science Act. So we're the long pole in the tent. We're supposed to be spending the last $7-8 billion of the CHIPS and Science Act to figure out how do we keep engineering and science going in microelectronics here. And, it's abysmal how little people understand. It's abysmal and frightening how few people want to really engage. Who wants to be a microprocessor designer? Who wants to be a tool or a process designer? Who wants to be a packaging designer? Who wants to actually understand all this stuff? Most of the people in the world, and maybe here at RPI, this is what they teach you, most people are plop on top people. It's like, I don't know what that thing is. I don't need to know what that thing is. It's like, I don't know what electricity is anymore either, right? I don't know how to make it. I don't know how to distribute it. I don't know why it's here. I don't know when it's not. I don't care. I'm telling you, that's not going to work for microelectronics, because you can do things to microelectronics that you really can't do to electricity. You can compromise it. You can bias it. You can make it come out your way. You're all AI maniacs, I'm sure. Wait till you see what happens to AI when it actually gets embedded in chips, and how much more productive it becomes, how much more efficient it becomes, how much more effective it becomes. Because right now it's probably one of the biggest criminal acts that we're committing on ourselves is the wastefulness of the energy associated with AI. I mean, you have no idea how much energy gets consumed by ChatGPT. To do what? Just to talk to your freaking computer? I mean, talk to somebody else. Don't talk to your computer. I mean, where is the real work? Where's the real innovation, the real productivity? And I'm not an anti-AI guy. So every time I give this lecture, somebody punches me in the nose and says, why are you against AI? I'm not against AI. I mean, think about the breakthrough event that got you to where we are with AI. Does anybody besides me and a few of the IBMers in the room, ex-IBMers, know what that event was? What was the event that brought AI to the table? Do you know what it was? IBM plays Jeopardy and wins. Not only plays it, but they win. It's the same kind of thinking when we played chess against Kasparov and beat him. That guy's still looking for a rematch, by the way. When I was there, he used to ask me for one like every year, and I finally said to him, we have retired Deep Blue. So no, you can't play it. It's in the Smithsonian. It's done, buddy. Move on with your life. But that event is what brought everything to light. These kind of events happen. They bring it to the surface. It's always there. It's just now I'm aware. I see it. I need to do something about it and with it. And IBM gets the credit for doing that. They don't get a lot of credit for capitalizing on the value that they created. Other people, and we can have debates about that or discussions if you'd like, but that's also an issue in life, right? You can create value and then you don't capture the value. I mean, there's some argument right now about this going on with microelectronics. So that's why the Chips and Science Act gets put in place, because China is in a better position to capitalize on the value that we've created than we are. And that can't be. That can't be. This plop on top mentality has got to stop. This is just a take-up curve. You've seen take-up curves. Everything's happening faster is all it says. You know, I do want you to know how old I am. So, I mean, the only take-up curve I was really interested in was electricity, because I actually figured out back in 1964 everything was going to become electrified. I didn't know what that meant, but everything was going to become electrified. And all I could see was this wave of thing after thing was going to become electrified. Train was going to become electrified. Cars were going to become electrified. I didn't know what I was talking about. I didn't know what I was going to do about that, but I could see it coming. I mean, every once in a while you have one of these epiphanies in your life, and this is when I'm a snot-nosed kid of, you know, back in high school in 62 and 63, having this epiphany that everything's going to become electrified. I mean, cars are still being electrified. And I don't just mean the electrification that runs the wheels. The car itself is electrified. It's an electric platform. Sometimes you don't buy things because it doesn't have enough plug-in units, you know, for all your freaking devices. You know, it has to have a different set of plug-in units in the back than it does in the front, so you can keep the kids quiet while you're driving the car. I mean, that electrification doesn't stop. That's also what enables self-driving cars, you know, more safer cars. So I kind of figured that out. Not knowing I didn't even know what Kirchhoff's voltage and current rules meant. I didn't know what a resistor's, you know, voltage rules looked like, or a capacitor's, or an inductor's, but I do now, and I probably always will remember that. And that's another issue, that not enough people understand the basics. So this is just another manifestation of that progression that we're talking about of technology, right? This is AI. I mean, everybody's talking about it. I'm not going to argue with you about AI, so I'm just going to move on. Quantum computing is another good one. I think it's very important. I think it's very valuable. I'm not going to argue with Marty, given we have a quantum center here, but be realistic about what you're talking about when you say these things. You know, we're not going to have a quantum computer in our back pocket. You know, it doesn't do von Neumann calculations. It's not going to replace your computer or your cell. It does a whole bunch of other things incredibly well. And that's what you have to keep always reminding yourself of. What problem did you start with? What problem are you trying to solve? And is this the better way to get the answer? That's what engineers do. I mean, the difference between engineers and scientists, I learned it right here at RPI. We put science to work for the common purposes of everyday life problems. That's what engineers do. You put science to work solving the problems of everyday life. That's what it's all about. And really good engineers always start with the problem. All of this is in the book. So I'm not going to, the genome, I mean, we were there when they sequenced the genome. We worked with Craig Ventnor, whether you like him or not, whether you want him to have the credit for sequencing the human genome or not. He got at least part of the credit. I mean, so we helped him with the technology that he needed to sequence the human genome. I serve on the board of the New York Genome Center. I mean, that whole center is built around the ability to take the best of physical science and put it together with the best of life science. And that's kind of the way we need to be thinking about change. The opportunity is going to always be there for us to solve problems if we are willing to run to the problem. Not run away from it, but run to the problem. I learned that here too. at RPI, to be honest with you. I have nothing but great things to say about my undergraduate education here, or my graduate education, as Matt knows, wherever Matt is now, over there at Syracuse. I mean, because I got my master's degree at Syracuse University. That's how Matt and I first hooked up, by the way, because he was there, as you know, before he came here. So look, the punchline of the book is you don't control change. So you need to figure out what you're going to do about it and how you're going to handle it in your life. How are you going to react to it? Are you going to embrace it? Are you going to fight it? Are you going to lead it? Are you going to take full advantage of it? Because it's going to change, whether you want it to or not. There are secular transitions going on. And those secular changes, you're not in control of them. And we don't seem to constantly remind ourselves of that. So I tell you one little story about my wife. God bless her. We're boyfriend and girlfriend for 62 years this year. 62 years. We met in high school, senior year, 1962. We got married in 67, so we've been at it for a while. She hates all of this stuff. She has a 2012 Lexus, and you'd have to pry that car out of her hands when she's dead, because she will not let it go. She hates technology. She doesn't like the thought of buying a new car, which is loaded with all kinds of new technology. So here we are, we're at this for 62 years and we're totally polar opposites. It's what I love, it's what I live for, it's what I try to promote. And, she blames me for all the problems of the world. You should know that. So, that should become clear to you. And it's all because of technology, and it's all because I did it personally. So I think you have to be realistic about those nuances. You have to be realistic about the fact that change is going to happen, and not everybody's going to come along, and what are you going to do about it? And how are we going to get everybody to come along? And maybe that's the art of it, right? That's not the science of it. It's not the engineering of it. It's the art of change. How do you make people comfortable? We could go back to, for just a second, the nuclear nonproliferation point, if I could. How did we get to the fact that we were able to model our entire nuclear stockpile? We put bombs in, and we take bombs out based on the model. Based on the model. And when we sit down with the Russians or we sit down with the Chinese, and they come in with their list of, you got to take this many weapons out and we'll take that many, we just say that's all garbage. We know what your bomb does and we know what our bomb does. So if we're taking one of our bombs out, you're taking 20 of your bombs out. Because that's the way it works. And, all of those calculations get done with one point in mind, but they're then used to actually come away with an entirely different value proposition, which is trying to make the world safer for itself. I remember having to convince everyone that we knew what we were doing. I used to have to go to Washington once a month to literally stand close water inspection, like, can you really do this? Yeah, we can do it. Maybe not exactly when you want it, but, we'll get it done. In 20 years, we gave them probably 30% more than they bargained for. But was everything exactly at the point in time when they wanted it? No. And many of the scientists who work on these, and I don't mean to dwell on nuclear weapons, that could be upsetting to some of you, but many of the scientists in the beginning thought it was the stupidest idea they've ever heard, because it couldn't be done. I don't know, Secretary Chu coming here anytime soon? I was on his advisory board when he was the energy secretary. He wasn't fond of modeling and simulation when I first met him. We convinced him he was wrong. maybe not wrong, but you can't say that number one, you can't say that to a Nobel laureate, and number one, you can't say that to the Secretary, of Energy, but he was wrong. And he finally admitted that there was, something more to it, something of value here, applying technology to this issue of modeling and simulation to be able to do things in a faster, better, less explosive, less invasive, less disturbing, less destroying fashion. That's what you have in front of you. That's the capability you have in your hands when you actually embrace technology and put it to work. As long as you start with the problem and not the answer. And too often we start with the answer and not the problem. And that's usually the difference between success and failure, to be honest with you. Lots of people in the book will talk to you about that. I'll just bring up one small example. There's a lot of AMD in the book. Lisa Su is a mentee of mine. I guess you know who she is, of course. Mark Papermaster is a mentee of mine. I brought them both to AMD when I joined the AMD board. And we had to rebuild that company from the bottom up. And we rebuilt it from the board down. Unheard of. Unheard of. That company was trading at $1.50 a share when I was on their board. Trades at $150 right now, in case you're wondering. It's got a bigger market cap, believe it or not, than IBM. It has a much bigger market cap than Intel. Hard to believe, huh? Hard to believe. And Lisa's now there 10 years. I just saw a little snippet she did somewhere about her life, and she was doing a wonderful job of explaining to somebody. And she uses this phrase, somebody taught me how to run to problems and not run from problems. Now you wonder who that was? Yeah, she listened well. She coached well. And there she is, one of the only women in an all-boys game. Microelectronics has been an all-boys game almost from the beginning. She is one of the richest women in the world and one of the richest women in semiconductors. And you could not find a nicer person either. She is just an amazing, delightful person. Unfortunately, her education was all at MIT. I shouldn't say that. I'm sorry. I didn't mean that, Marty. But you taught her well. You taught her well. But look, all of that can happen if you're change-minded. If you just keep looking for, and the problem is what? Tell me what the problem, don't tell me the problem is I don't have one of those, or I don't have one of these. What do you have? And how much change can you make with what you do have? And that's how AMD did it, by the way, because they always had less technology, probably still do, than Intel. The one thing they had was control of the architecture below the API level. And nobody ever wanted to do anything with it other than me. And I said to him, are you crazy? Just don't violate that API, change that microarchitecture. And if you like the microarchitecture, change the nanoarchitecture. And if you like the nanoarchitecture, change the freaking pico architecture. Because the further down you go, and the closer you get to gate level, the better served you are. The faster your devices are. This isn't hard. Am I making sense to you? Do you know what I'm saying? This idea of staying where you are and not changing is something you do at your own great peril and risk. Because someone else will. You're not the only smart people in the world, although you like to think that from time to time. There are other people who are going to do this because they're somewhere else in the world and they're hungrier than you. And they have a bigger passion to get something done than you do. Their motivation is different. Remember how many people in this on this planet live at the base of the pyramid? You know what the base of the pyramid is? $2 a day or less to subsist. Anybody really want to live at the base of the pyramid? And are you implying that they're stupid because they're at the base of the pyramid? That they're not as smart as you? Of course they're smarter than you is probably the right way to think about it. They're bright. And if you don't think this way, if you don't keep worrying about if you don't do it and if you don't do it quickly, someone else will, then you're going to succumb to if nothing changes, nothing changes. You'll become a victim of that thinking. Okay, we already covered that. The innovative mindset, it's the problem. Learn to listen. IBM taught me that lesson. There's a lot of interesting stories in the book about how stupid I was when I first started at IBM. Became a manager. My first job, Burlington, Vermont. IBM had a great facility there. See some smiles on some people's faces. I was now managing the team I worked with. We designed 3 or 4 chips together early on, and now I'm their manager. And guess how smart I was? I knew every one of their jobs, and I made their lives totally miserable because nothing they did was good enough. That's not the way I would have done it. So I almost lost my job at IBM after that first opinion survey. And I honestly, if it weren't for some poor person in Endicott who got a slightly worse score than me, I would have been the one gotten fired. But I didn't. But I learned. I turned myself around and I realized that more than half of my job was listening to what's wrong, what are your problems, what can you do, what can't you do. And then I became the enabler for success. I like that word, enablement. Tell me what's wrong, Ruth. What do you not have? Why can't you go faster? Why can't you do more? What's stopping you? We'll work on that. We'll get that for you. And then you become committed. So when I enable you, Ruth, to do something, that means I'm committed to you. Not against empowerment, but sometimes that's a dangerous word. You know, I could just as soon have the same conversation with you, Ruth, and say, I'm empowering you to get the job done, Ruth. Like, what the hell does that mean, Nick? I mean, you know, are you going to help me? Or are you just going to watch me? Are you going to grade and score me? Or what does that mean? So, enablement. That's a powerful word. It means a lot to people. You know, when you're going to become their enabler. Work with you. Let me understand what your problem is. But you can't do that if you haven't listened well. I already kind of addressed this when I touched the base of the pyramid. This is what I mean, you know. Intelligence is uniformly distributed across all of us. That's the way nature works. To assume that is not true is just one of the biggest mistakes of your life. There are smarter people than you in the world. You just don't know who they are. They don't know you. You don't know them, but they are smarter than you. And for you to not think that way is a big mistake. And it'll get you in the end. And time, as an innovator, time is never your friend. Whenever you hear somebody's, well, we'll do that tomorrow. That's usually a good indication you're not doing it, period. Or you're not capable of doing it. There is no more time. Time is the one thing that normalizes everything. So you have to take advantage of every minute of every day and not let yourself be put down by tomorrow's soon enough. Tomorrow is never going to be soon enough. So never think of it as a friend. Create value, details do matter. Of course they do. So here I want to say something about RPI. Believe it or not, those simple equations that RPI taught me as I became an electrical engineer for what goes on. How do electrons work? How do holes work? What are they? What do they mean? You know, what is an inductor? What's a capacitor? What's a resistor? You have no idea how important they are when I go to work at IBM, because we don't know what we're doing. We don't have models for the devices that we're building, the semiconductor devices. We have to develop those models. We have to develop them from primitives. Primitives that are based on those very same primitives that you taught me when I was here. I mean, I'm an FET, I was a bipolar designer, I became an FET designer. If you remember the capacitance equation, that's all you need. It's all a bunch of voltage moving around, charging or discharging a capacitor anyway. So you've got to be able to know it well enough to be able to say it simply, to help people understand why this versus that. In the beginning, we had no models. In the beginning, they were all wrong if you had them. Nobody knew what they were doing. I mean, it's hard for you to fathom this, but there's an equivalent of nobody knows what they're doing that you're living through. There is, I don't know what it is, but there is one, but that was mine. It was like, okay, let's try this. Let's try that. How do we know? Who knows? Maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong. But why? And then, all of a sudden, you come to people like Bajan here, who is, now developing CMOS 10, 12, 14, 22 and a half. When he forgets we didn't even have CMOS 1 when I started. Nobody even knew what CMOS was. We started with one kind of FET technology and had to move it, change it to get to another. If you're not willing to do those, and IBM struggled. IBM didn't even know if it wanted to be in the FET business. Why do you think they sent us to Burlington? Fishkill was a bipolar bigot world. Anybody remember bipolars besides me? There's a few of us, yeah. I mean, every friggin' thing was made out of bipolar technology before it was made out of FET technology. And literally, IBM sends us to Vermont from Fishkill. Like, we got no room for you here, kid. Just pack your bags, get all your folks, and move up to Vermont. And good luck. And yeah, the sun shines maybe 4 or 5 days a year, but you'll be okay. My mother actually thought I was going off the end of the earth when I moved out of the Mid-Hudson Valley. It was like, does the sun really shine in Vermont? Yeah, it does. So these are the things that you have to come up against yourself. You'll have your own equivalent of these things. I don't know what they're going to be, but it's happening to you right now. So change is always going to be there for you to grapple with, for you to figure out what the opportunity, but don't become intimidated by it, is my message. Don't. It's all basic. There's something fundamental about everything. Do you know what the fundamental physical thing is? By the way, Pepe Borrego, for those of you who remember, he was terrific at this. He could drive you right to the basics of everything, and his tests were something to behold. I mean, I wish they had saved them all, because you didn't even have to go to the class. If you could read the question would inevitably lead you to the answer. If you could just follow his logic, because he was never actually testing you on what he taught you, he was testing you on the concepts that he taught you. And he was looking to see whether you were smart enough to apply them. Does anybody know this guy besides me? Yeah? Just brilliant. He taught me all of these incredible tricks and tools and gave me all kinds of incredible things to think about as I moved forward. And that's, to some degree, these details do matter. So nobody should graduate from RPI as an electrical engineer if you don't know the basic current equations, if you don't know what a capacitor does, an inductor does, a resistor does. If you don't understand that stuff, you shouldn't graduate from here with a double E degree. We don't need you in the world, because it's going to change, and who but you is going to figure out what this change is all about? You're going to need that basic understanding. Maybe there's an equivalent for mechanical engineers, chemical engineers, and everybody else. But I'm an electrical engineer, and I said that up front. I should have also said this to you up front, and I'm sorry. And maybe I did. I've been given this pitch too many times. I didn't come here to insult anybody. And if I did, or if I do, I apologize. I'm here to actually kind of give you my view of the world, my view of what's inside this book. A lot of you could be sitting there saying how horsey, ducky is this? I mean, it's pretty trivial. I never claimed that I was going to give you a Nobel laureate thought, right? I'm just kind of refreshing who you are, what you're thinking, and kind of giving you something to think about in a different way, right? So never claimed to actually own something unique and different here, other than to put it together in a way that makes sense to me. Does that make sense to you? Hopefully. Don't forget anything, don't throw anything away. Don't throw it away. You're an engineer. You don't throw it away. It's going to come back. Somebody else is going to use it. Somebody else is going to do something with it. Quantum devices, Josephson devices, anybody know how they go together? Yeah, okay, come on, you know. Don't throw anything away. Everything old becomes new again. Don't be stupid. I mean, you know, it's not a dumb idea. It's just not a now idea. It could be an idea tomorrow. It could be an idea 10 days from now, 10 years from now. Don't throw things away. Remember all those concepts. Remember all those basics. This is a bit controversial. Actually, Matt mentioned this. I served on the Spellings Commission for the Future of Higher Education for a year. I also served as the chairman of the Board of Regents for the state of Connecticut for higher education. And I'm not trying to strut my bona fides in front of you, but I think a lot about higher education. And the theory of this case, which is well known, well documented, a lot of other people are talking about it, is we need to build people as broad as we do deep. And this idea of just, you know, and I don't want anybody to get insulted now. This is one of those places where you could leave me. You become a PhD, God bless you, you start to know more and more about less and less, because that's the way it works. You know, your study goes way down deep on a particular topic. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as you realize that's not the way the world works. The world works this way, in a T-shaped model, in a T-shaped fashion. Now, for whatever good or bad at RPI, somehow you made me a T-shaped person when I graduated from here. That was a long time ago. So it's not like you screw everybody up. Maybe you just don't always enable everybody, you know, to be both broad and deep. Because here's the punchline. Value migrates, and you don't control it. Just because you're doing it doesn't mean anybody wants it. Value migrates, you don't control it. The market does, doesn't it? I mean, that's where you go. You go where the market goes. We already talked about AI. We already talked about Jeopardy. We already talked about, you know, high performance, you know, mega scale, you know, petascale, zetascale computers. Value migrates. You do not control it. Don't ever forget that message. The more T-shaped you are, the better served you are, because you don't control value. And if you got to move, move. Move. For those of you who are getting ready to leave RPI and you think you're done, I have news for you. You've only just begun. And if you leave here thinking you're done, you're done. You are done. Because everything keeps changing. Lifelong learning is what you have to commit yourself to. It doesn't end. I'm not a life scientist. I hated life science. I never took biology. I know more about life science now than probably 50% of the people in the world. And I don't even like it. But I'm smart enough to know it's the science of the 21st century. Of course, I have a daughter who's in life sciences, and she's also banged away at me to make me a little bit better on this topic. But think about what I said. It is the science of the 21st century. We're going to look back at life science and you'll be 125 years old and you'll say, well, here's how I got here. Because of life science being enabled by physical science. Don't park yourself in one space. Punchline, if you want to be a leader, and a lot of leaders in the book, Sam Palmisano, Tom Rennie from the Bank of New York, Lisa Su, as I mentioned, so many others. You have to have a vision, but you have to have the courage of your conviction to move to that vision. Just having a vision doesn't do it. You have to have the courage of your conviction to move people to it. There's a lot of IBM examples in there that I was associated with. I'm going to spare you them. Some of my colleagues know about them. But one that's near and dear to my heart, the IBM mainframe. Everybody wanted it dead. They gave me that job. They gave me that job in 1991 to quote unquote fix it. I didn't do it. I didn't make the problem, but I owned the problem. And what did I end up having to do? I ended up having to lay off every other person in the Mid-Hudson Valley. Shut Fishkill down. Half of Endicott, all of Kingston. They were doing the wrong thing. They were investing in the wrong technology. I had people from corporate headquarters come to me and tell me I didn't know what I was doing. Like, okay, who cares? You know, you're from corporate headquarters, my neck is on the line, I've got the job. Well, you don't understand. There is no elasticity of MIPS. MIPS happens to be the way you sell a mainframe. Their answer was there was no elasticity of MIPS. Now, I didn't go to business school here, but I have a very simple business equation. I'm an electrical engineer, you understand? Right? I knew what needed to be done. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew how to do it. So I developed one simple business equation to shut everybody down. P times Q equals R. P, price, times Q, quantity, equals revenue. It's that simple. It's that simple. You think you're right? Okay, let's try. Let me start lowering the price of a MIP, and let's see how many more Qs we get, how much more quantity we get. This does not come as a surprise to you, does it? The IBM mainframe, released in 1964, System 360, just turned 60 years old. 60 years old. And in 1990, they were telling me to kill it. They were telling me they knew better, that P times Q doesn't equal R. That platform, by the way, not a secret, is perhaps one of the most lucrative platforms ever developed in the world. Puts Microsoft to shame. To shame. And the first line of code ever written on that platform in 1964 still runs on that platform, unaltered and unrecompiled. Totally compatible with itself. Now, how unique is that? Does that sound like an earth-shaking idea? Does that sound like, like this guy must be in for a Nobel Prize? No. Isn't it common sense? Isn't it common sense? Think about it. So we held that line. We kept it compatible. Changed everything else about it. We went down to the details and changed all the details, but you never knew it. Because we hid them all from you. And you can do that with technology. Just because I'm changing doesn't mean you have to change. And the original promise that was given for that system by Watson Jr. was exactly that promise, which is, dear client, buy one of these, 1964. Never again will you have to change your applications or your data because of us. You can change because you want to change or because other things, but not because of me. You know how many fights I had with IBM on that? The lawyers didn't think you could do that. The finance people thought I was going to kill everybody. Everybody was going to perish because of what I did. Here we are. Just celebrated 60th birthday. And the last, 30 years of that 60 were on us. We did that. I had the privilege and the honor of bringing Fred Brooks, Bo Evans, and Eric Block together at the Computer History Museum in California when we celebrated the 25th anniversary, actually the 30th anniversary of the mainframe. You can get it out of the file. You can listen to them. And I asked the question, what were you thinking when you did this? How long did you think it was going to last? By the way, Bo Evans actually worked on the RISC-based architecture as well. So he was trying to bury the System 360 architecture, even while working for IBM. He didn't do that because he was a smarter person than that. He understood what was going on. So they said to a person, Nick, we thought maybe 25 years. So Nick, the last 5 is on you. And the last 5 became the last 30. Do you see the power of change? You see the power of engineering? Do you see the power of details? Do you see the power of understanding what you're doing? I mean, do you really see it? I can't do any of that stuff anymore. I can't. I mean, I do understand the equations. I do understand what needs to be done, but I can't do it physically. But I can certainly enable people with a vision, with a commitment to do it. And that's exactly what we did. With 1/2 the people. We laid off 35,000 people in the Mid-Hudson Valley. Many of my aunts, many of my uncles, many of my cousins, many of my relatives were laid off. I used to get a call from my mother, God rest her soul, every night. Nikki, what are you doing now? You can't let your uncle go. You can't let your niece go. That's when I said to my mother, Ma, now's a real good time for you to stop telling everybody your son, the IBM executive. It would be just very important for you to be quiet for a while, for me to get through this. And we did get through it. We did get through it. Not, believe me, I'm Italian. I'm very emotional. I'm emotive. I cry very easily. I'm surprised I haven't cried yet tonight. But I cried when a lot of those people left. It wasn't their fault. This is another consequence of leadership. Whose fault is it? Is it never anybody's fault? I'm sorry. You're the last 1,000 people. You got to go. It's not my fault. Who the hell's fault is it if it's not your fault as the leader? Somebody did the wrong thing. It wasn't you. It wasn't you. It wasn't you. Somebody did the wrong thing. Own it. Own it. You never know. You never know when this whole thing's going to turn around on you if you don't own it yourself. This is leadership. This is the courage of your conviction and the ability to move to it. The ability to move to it. Doesn't do me any good that you have a vision if you're not willing to move to that vision. And as most of my IBM friends know, I not only had to do this once, I had to do it twice because Gerstner comes to IBM, and then I had to convince him that I knew what I was doing. But thank God that was a little bit easier than anybody else because he actually understood P times Q equals R. And that was my performance plan. It became very simple. You get it right, Nick, or you leave. And I said, it's fine. I'm on the line. We just put 35,000 people out of work. I'm on the line. I'm ready to go, boss. Put me in. This is what leaders do. I don't care in what business you're in. I don't care if it's life science, political science, educational science, physical science. I don't care. Go look at real leaders. Go look at people who make a difference, have made a difference, and people care about. And you will find a common thread. A common thread. They act on their vision. They have a vision, they have a view, and they're not afraid to act on it. I put these things up here for a different purpose, but I do want you to know it's never ending. It's never ending. I mean, the list goes on and on. I'm going to give you a plug right now for the biggest issue we have in this country is we do not have enough women and people of color in the science and the engineering of microelectronics. And we have a deficit. Now, I'm not speaking to you as a member of the National Semiconductor Technology Center because I'm not allowed to do that. I'm just speaking to you as Nick Donofrio, one of your own. We've got probably a 20, maybe as little as 15-year deficit. And if we're going to actually take advantage of all the money we've spent on the CHIPS and Science Act, we need more women, more people of color engaged in microelectronics. And I'm not talking about the plop on top stuff, I'm talking about designing the chips, designing the processes, designing the tools. Now, I know you know something about this. I know Marty's done a great job here. I've certainly talked to Marty about this. We're screwed. I'm sorry for all the white boys in the room here, but young men are declining in college enrollment. They're not increasing. Women are increasing. I mean, there are secular trends going on. Know them, understand them, grab them, embrace them. We will lose whatever advantage we're gaining by spending $100 billion of taxpayers' money if we don't have the talent to make a difference. And it can't just be people that look like me. And my last comment to you before we go to questions is, when all the people in the room look like you, trust me, it's the wrong room. Trust me, it's not going to be a good answer. Trust me, you're in trouble, and you don't even know it. With that, I will stop and be happy to take any questions you might have. So we were going to make you walk, but since I got the microphone, I'm walking to you.
Thank you. Okay, so I read Kasparov's book about deep thought, or deep blue, was it? Something like that. And so he talked about when the computing power allows the chess to be solved by brute force, then the computer could win every time. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think he's right, but that wasn't our point, Peter. That's not why we played chess. We lost the first time, by the way, when we played him. He keeps forgetting that. We just beat him the second time when it was a little bit more notorious because we learned from our mistakes. And we didn't retire it just to be cute. That wasn't our point. Was high performance computing, modeling, and simulation is important. We can do it, America. Wake up, America. Wake up, America. It's coming. You see what we just did? We just beat this guy. And I have to say the same thing is probably true. I wasn't at IBM at the time, but I'm sure the same thought process was there for AI. Like, wake up, America. If we can play Jeopardy and beat them, it's here. What are you, kind of asleep at the switch? It's here. So Peter, it's those kind of moments. I know it gets emotional, and I know he got emotional over it because he did want a rematch. But I kept saying to him, that's not what we played you for. We're done. It's retired. we already made our point. Then we went on to do the nuclear stockpile simulation work to prove our point. I mean, one small fact of history that you should know about that work with the nuclear stockpile, it's those same friggin' computers that made fusion happen. Those same computers were used to find the last missing piece of the energy source. I mean, I got a note from my friends at Lawrence Livermore telling me that's how they closed the equation. Be careful. I mean, there's so much to do here. I'm not saying that computers replace people. I mean, I think Livermore would be the first one to tell you. They probably have twice the number of people, working on variously different challenging issues. But you can certainly make them more productive. You can certainly take some of the drudgery away. And that's what you want to do, right? Punctuate your point with who in this room, no IBMers to answer, remembers the very first IBM slogan, IBM logo. The first IBM logo. Speak up. He wants to say think. Wrong. What was the very first IBM slogan? Time-saving machines. It's all about productivity. Time-saving machines. It's all about productivity. That's what we're talking about. Not AI is going to replace you. AI is going to enable you. It's not that computers are going to replace you. They're going to enable you. It's not that the internet's going to remove you. It's going to enable. That's the way this has got to go, Peter. Or else that equation, P times Q equals R, doesn't work.
I'm loving this chat. I really thank you for coming. The T-shape, I really love your idea that the team focus and the deep, because that's basically what I do all day. I try to enable people like you talk about. I love it. But how do you teach that? Is it mentorship? Is it internships? So I did it by the School of Hard Knocks. You make a lot of mistakes and then you say, oh, I got to course correct, I got to pivot. But how do you teach it? How do you educate people?
I'm not going to tell you how to teach, but I am going to say to you, perhaps the best decision in my life, besides coming to RPI, was to become a co-op student. There is nothing better than the real world, to your point, Brian, to understand what is really happening. It just doesn't work that way. You come here, you tell us one thing, and then you go to work and say, it don't work that way. This is the way it works. We kind of forget that. That's not important. We found out that that's like a 27th order effect. Here's where you got to focus. You can't say enough about a better integrated relationship with jobs for your students. I mean, if you could put them all on, a co-op program, or if you could put them all on an internship program, you should. Or at least make sure that they graduate with at least one of those, somewhere in their 4-year cycle. You can't say enough about the real world, Brian. So bring them closer to here. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know how to do that for you. It's a difficult challenge. But my sense is the schools that do more of that are doing better. The closer you get them to the real world, the better. It's not RPI's job in life to become something else. You are who you are. You're very pragmatic. This using science to solve the problems of everyday life, own it, is what I'd say. Own it. And you're not going to get everyday life here. As much as you all think you are not everyday life. And the other thing I would push hard for you is we have to get more of you into the real world. We have to put more of you on rotating assignments with industry, whether they're sabbaticals or whether they're just swap programs. I was a big fan of swap programs. I'll give you one of my best engineers, you give me one of your best professors, and call it even for 12 months, right? I'd go down that path, Brian. Yeah, one other little thought I had as I was talking to you is how you're judged going forward. Matters. And my philosophy of life is you're going to be judged less by what you know and more about what you do, about what you don't know going forward. Because there's so much more to know. And it's just a reality of life. Does that make sense to you? Other questions or comments? Yes.
I was fascinated with your curves, and I'm an architect, so I'm not an engineer, and I don't understand curves.
Okay. I can say some of my best friends were architects.
Okay, I'm sure they were.
Like some of your best friends are engineers.
But I'm wondering if, and I worked in the government,
Yeah.
I'm wondering if the curve is a little bit different in government than you see it in your curves.
Okay, so I don't know what I want to say to you about government because I also work in government. Obviously, with NatCast here, the National Semiconductor, we're being funded principally by DOC. So they are our only funder. But I've spent a huge amount of time in the cleared space. I actually had a Q clearance for the Department of Energy, and I have a clearance for defense and intelligence. So I hear you about government. I also spent a lot of time on the MITRE board, and that their whole business is government. I was there for 12 years on both the public side as well as the defense and intelligence side. So I kind of think I know what you're poking at. My answer to your question is the government does understand a lot of this before everyone else. I am a particularly huge fan of the energy labs. Some of the smartest people in the world work in the U.S. Department of Energy labs. But if you're thinking the government is smart enough to know, all of this stuff ahead of time, they're not. It's sad. The government doesn't understand the source of a lot of the stuff. It didn't understand the source until recently. The software bill of materials was asked for. It doesn't realize that half the code that it's buying is being made in a foreign nation state that could become hostile to us. It does now. The same thing I could say is true of services. Those services could be originated in a foreign nation state that could become hostile to us. So you've got to keep asking the question in some detail, like where did that come from? Why did it come from there? Are you sure it came from there? And the government doesn't know everything that it uses and deploys. It depends on the system, and I have to also say, all too often the government is trusting. They trust you, as a aerospace defense contractor, or they trust you, as an FSI, a federal systems integrator, only to find out that somebody working for you is lying, cheating, and stealing for the government. So they're going to become more suspicious. I mean, we're running through this on the Chips and Science Act. The basic reason the Chips and Science Act happened is because somebody went back and looked at the value chain for the aerospace, defense, and intelligence industry and said, we don't own it. We have no idea what's in it. We don't know if there's an extra bit over here or an extra zero over there. We don't know if there's an extra transistor over there we don't know it. And you told me it was being made here, and I find out it was being made over there. I mean, that's the truth of the matter, is we let ourselves get sloppy. Details matter. We let the details escape. And you can't do that. Not in a game of life and death. And that's what a lot of these things become, right? They're life and death games. All the stuff you read in science fiction books about spies and espionage and intrigue, believe it. Believe it and more. Believe it and more. So we got to help, is my point. That's why I'm such a big fan of this Chips and Science Act. This bipartisan bill matters. Getting everything here to make here first, and then we're just going to develop everything here. And I'm not against globalization. Let's find other things to globalize. Or let's find other ways let's build, maybe somebody should build a trusted globalization network, whatever that means. You heard it here first, by the way. If you come up with that, I want a piece of your action. I don't know what it means, but I don't think you can't assume anything. And for too long we have. Does that help you? I mean, even though you're an architect, I think you know what I'm saying. With that, I thank you again. I wish you all the best and continued success here at RPI.